We'll get through it, I hope. I wanted to talk to you about the incentive policy again. We met, the committee last met early in March, obviously before the shutdown. But I wanted to give you, a refresher, a quick and dirty refresher on the incentive program, which has been around since 1994. Since that time, the town has approved um, 33 tax assessment agreements. And we've had tax assessment agreements with 33 companies. In addition to those 33, another 5 were approved by the Cheshire Town Council just recently. That was for J&A Enterprises, Marbridge, Constitution Surgery Alliance, Rondo, and Joe Nozzle as well. And we've got a couple more that'll go on a grand list come October 1, 2020, we think, depending on when they get a certificate of occupancy. The way this incentive program works is if you have a project that's pegged to the cost of the improvements to the real property, anything in excess of $3 million is eligible to receive a 7-year incentive from the town. We take 50% of the assessed value of the real estate off the books, and you're only taxed thereby on 50%. Anything less than $2 million receives a 4-year tax break, and it's the same percentage. It would be a 4-year tax break. Again, you're only taxed for 50% of the improvements on the real property. We don't factor in the land. It's just the building. We used to factor in the land and at one time the personal property, but it was costing the town a lot of money. So we backed off and just factored in the cost of the improvements to the real property, which is still a generous tax break. And if you recall, 3 years ago, the program was changed. We used to give 3-year incentives, 3 years at 45%, and then 7 years at 45%, but that was bumped up to 4 years at 50% and 7 years at 50%. So the program was improved. We look for a couple of things in the incentive tax assessment agreements, clawback provisions. We ask for a 10-year presence in Cheshire, and we ask for the companies to maintain a certain staffing level. And we're pretty hard and fast with that, and we've invoked those clawbacks on 3 occasions. Most notably was for Alexion Pharmaceuticals. Alexion didn't meet their 10-year presence in Cheshire, so we basically sent them a tax bill for the money that they received from the town, their tax break, which is to the tune of $330,000, and they made good. We haven't lost a dollar of taxpayers' money under the clawback provisions, and that's good, and I didn't expect we ever will. We watch these things like a hawk, and we're trying to protect the taxpayer interest. I'm going to say we, because Catherine Donegan, who's on this conference, did a lot of legwork for me. And we looked at 23 towns inside Connecticut, and we looked at another 10 outside Connecticut. And then I picked 13 towns in Connecticut and pretty much provided you a spreadsheet of some of the incentive offerings to those towns. All of them give tax breaks. Some of them, in addition to tax breaks, give low-cost grants and loans for facade improvements, what have you. And Wallingford provides low-cost electric, and they use that as an economic development draw as well. The town of Cheshire used to give building permit fee waivers or reductions, and some towns do that now, but it was costing the town a considerable amount of money, so the council pulled back on that. Periodically, we'll provide infrastructure money. We provided money for Bizzuto's, and we provided money for Connecticut Air Gas to extend McCausland Court. And those funds and those improvements and that incentive is paid off. I think you could agree with me in spades. The towns that I picked are pretty comparable to town and population-wise and aggressiveness. I was also picked out, although some of the towns are larger in Cheshire, some of our surrounding communities, because Bill Stanley and I were talking earlier, and they really are our competition. You know who they are. It's Hamden, Southington, Meriden. although Meriden not on the list. And we're surrounded by enterprise zone communities, and we have an enterprise zone as well, but it's limited to 50 acres around the former Pratt & Whitney plants. And that led to EDAC coming to Cheshire. EDAC since has been purchased by a South Korean aerospace company called Hanwha, and they're up in Cheshire Industrial Park right now. Jim Jenks has given me some suggestions over the last couple of months about incentives, and I got to compliment Jim for really reaching out to me. He suggested loans and grants, and I just don't see the town going down the road of grants. Dave suggested that I reach out to the Waterbury Development Corporation, and they still have money for low-cost loans, so Cheshire companies can avail themselves of that funding as well. One thing that Jim did mention in his email to me, and I want to follow up on that, is I think we could do a lot more with non-incentive type programs, either working with the chamber, Quinnipiac University, the business school there, to help small businesses, that may need some assistance or guidance or additional programming. I'm probably going to head up the recovery, long-term recovery committee on behalf of the town. And I was thinking about maybe using that as the vehicle to do some of these programs in addition to some of the other things that we'll be looking at on that committee. So the other thing I wanted to mention to you, and I talked to Bill offline a little bit before the meeting, the assessor, before the assessor left the town, did some numbers for me, and it's really misleading because if you just do the taxes gained and the taxes foregone during the tax assessment periods of the 32 or 33 companies, the town has gained an additional $5.1 million in revenue from the companies that received tax breaks. During that time, we basically gave up 4.9 million, so it's almost 50-50. But that's really misleading, because if you project long-term from the beginning of time since we started doing this program, the return on investment has been good. It's almost 4 to 1. And when we looked at it in 2017, we basically projected tax gain of 17 million since the beginning of time with the tax incentive companies. And, we also gave up $4 million. So it's better than 4 to 1. So that ratio is still holding. And that's a good ratio. Tell you the truth, guys, if I had my way, if it was a perfect world, I'd recommend not doing incentive programs. But we got to compete, and there is a lot of competition out there. We're ringed by enterprise zone communities. All the companies ask me, they all, want to know what Cheshire has to offer. Not one doesn't, and I would recommend this to you. The incentive program has been working. It's been working well. It's relatively generous. We're probably in the middle of the pack relative to the other towns that do incentives. And that's where I think a good position for the town to be. And I would also recommend continuing it for another 3-year period. The council's been really good with this over the years. They've extended the program for either 2 or 3 years. The 3 years seems to be working. And that would be my recommendation to you. I'm going to leave it in your hands. I think the Economic Development Commission, when we meet again in June, we'll be looking for a recommendation from this committee. Okay.
Sounds like it makes good sense to me, Jerry. I mean, you're the guy that's in the seat that knows best what you need, what tools you need to compete with the other towns and what businesses are looking for. And if you're saying that what we have works for you, that's good enough for me.
Yeah. And remember, there are other tools in the toolbox too. We have the ability in the incentive program to offer tax assistance for personal property. It says manufacturing, but manufacturing in its statute is now exempt, but for warehousing and retail. But, the commission decided a few years ago that you'd have to bring in at least $500,000, but we have the wherewithal to do it. And if somebody were to ask for that in addition to a real estate tax break, I would probably have to mix and match, and it better be in the town's interest to go down that line. So we do have other tools in the toolbox at our disposal. We have TIF.
Right.
Derek mentioned TIF, and I could footnote that in the tax incentive policy if you'd like as well. One other thing that we talked about, and I've talked to Dave about this and Bill a little bit, we should put a deadline for when a company has to approve for a tax break. And, Dave's suggestion is a good one. It would be, you have up until 2 months after the issuance of a CO. I could live with that. That doesn't mean you have to wait till a CO. You can apply early if you want. I would encourage them to apply early. And sometimes they do apply early because it affects their financing. If they want to go to a bank for a loan. But I do want to put a deadline on it because I don't want to leave it open-ended. Somebody gets approval, the building is built, after a year, they come back and approach the town for a tax break. So that's my thought on that as well.
Hey, Jerry,
Yeah.
question. Plainville, who's funding the revolving loan fund?
In their write-up, it says that it's town funds.
Really?
Yeah, that's what it says. It's either Plainville or New Milford. I can't recall. Well, one of those two.
On your spreadsheet, it was Plainville.
Plainville. Then it is Plainville.
Do you know how much they funded the revolving loan fund with?
No. No. I could find that out if you like.
No. I just find it interesting that the town has the extra funds to put at risk like that.
Yeah.
At least they used to.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be a tough one for me to go at this point to sell to the council, knowing what they're looking at for this year's budget in the next 2 years. Nevertheless, if there's a justification for it, I'd be glad to make it. I don't know if I could just make it right now, though, to be honest with you.
Oh, I agree. All the towns don't know what they're actually facing at this point.
Right. Don, Derek, you have anything on your end?
Yeah, the only thing I had was the timing. This has to be all reapproved by June 30th.
Well, I think because of what happened with COVID-19, what I'd like to do, it does end on June 30th, is at the next EDC meeting in June is ask for a recommendation from the full commission based on your recommendation. And then it goes to the council. I don't know if they're going to make it by June 30th. I don't think that's a problem.
Okay.
Be honest with you, but I'll alert.
When's the next council meeting in relation to our EDC meeting in June?
They meet on the second Tuesday, I believe, and sometimes the 4th. So if they meet a second time, we can get it done. If not, they'll have to take it up in July, which I don't think will be a problem, to be honest with you.
Okay.
The only other thing I recall from the last meeting is we were going to put some language in there that the program had to be consistent with some of the TIF programs that are in place now.
Yeah, what we talked about was no double dipping.
Right.
And I could that's actually in the TIF plan right now, the master plan. But I could work that in if you'd like into the in the incentive policy too.
Well, if you're going to mention the TIF in the incentive policy, then it probably makes sense to make it very obvious. There's no double dipping. You either participate in the TIF or the other incentive.
Okay. Derek, this was your suggestion. What do you think? You brought it up at the last meeting, the TIF.
Yep. Makes sense.
Okay. All right, then I'll work it in. I'll send everything out to you again. I'll send you the revised policy. Take a look.
Do you need a motion or a vote, Jerry? What do you need?
It wouldn't hurt if you care to, or consensus that, you find continuation of the policy acceptable for another 3-year period.
Yeah, if you need a motion, I'll make the motion and that we add an application deadline for those incentives to no later than 60 days after the CO is issued.
Okay, and for a 3-year period?
For a 3-year period, right.
Okay. Derek?
Second, and I agree.
Okay.
Agree.
Okay, thank you very much. That's it for me.
Wow.
You know, I'd like to get back to Dave for his comment about my appearance, but I'm not going to be.
And we're gonna, you think we'll have our June meeting, the EDC, same way?
I think so. I think so. And, you know, there's not much else we can do about it. It's the best we can, but we'll have a meeting.
Okay,
I think two things on the agenda. We'll try to keep it brief. Number one would be this, and also the election officers too.
right.
Are we going to have to reschedule it till later in the day so that Catherine can participate in the meeting?
It wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't hurt to do that. If that's okay with you.
Works for me.
It's fine with me.
All right, Don,
I'm okay.
Garrett,
What day is that?
it would be the,
16.
yeah,
16th?
the 16th.
Yeah, yep, that works.
Okay.
So what time do you want to? When do you want to?
4:30 or so for.
Okay,
All right, I'll put it on my calendar.
Okay. Thank you very much.
thank you, Jerry. Good
All
work.
right.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Derek, Dave.
Right. Have a good one.